So this is going to be a bonus video. I figured we had to spring forward on Sunday night, so I need to have some extra content to make up for that, I suppose. But in all seriousness, I saw that a question had been asked about daylight savings time, and since that's not going to be topical a week from now, I figured I should address that today. So I'm going to be doing that, hopefully relatively briefly this time. As always, I'm Alexander Haberbush, and I'm president of the Lex Rex Institute and a constitutional attorney, and nothing in this video constitutes legal advice. So let's take a look at that question. So today we're asked, what's the legal history of daylight savings time? Our second question for today. Well, that's an interesting question. To start off with, daylight savings time is sometimes misattributed to Benjamin Franklin as the originator of that idea. He did talk about something similar to daylight savings time, where the clocks would all be changed, so everybody had to get up an hour earlier. But he proposed this idea as sort of a satirical idea, kind of similar to Jonathan Swift's Modest Proposal in a known satirical magazine. And if you read it, it's actually pretty funny. A lot of the provisions in it that he has, he has provisions about keeping shops under armed guard and all sorts of things. We'll try to link that article in the video description, because that's worth a read. Give that a read if you have the chance. But as far as the legal history of daylight savings in the United States, well, I assume this is asked because of the Sunshine Protection Act that was recently approved unanimously by the Senate. I guess both parties equally despise daylight savings time. But it's actually not the first time that we've gotten rid of daylight savings time, and daylight savings time has not always been around in this country. In fact, it was first introduced in 1918 as part of the Standard Time Act. That was signed by Woodrow Wilson. It was approved by his Congress, and it was part of World War I, really, that we implemented this. And it had all kinds of provisions standardizing time across the United States. Previously, time had been set by the states or even local governments. A train would leave a train station in one city, get to another city, oftentimes in the same state, and they had to change their clocks when they got there because local municipal time was different. Although some states by 1918, most of them had standardized their time. But in 1918, it was the first federal standardization of time across the country, and that implemented daylight savings time. And so how did they do this? Under what power were they able to change time? Well, if it's any hint, the Commerce Commission, the Interstate Commerce Commission, was the entity that was given authority to implement these standardizations of time. But it actually was not enacted under the Commerce power. Rather, it was enacted under the Weights and Measures Clause of Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, Congress's powers. Congress is given the power to create standard weights and measures. So time, is a measurement. Clocks measure time. So hour in the day is a measurement. They decided they were going to standardize that. I think that debatably falls within the congressional power to create standard weights and measures. So, we won't argue that in this video. But that was implemented in 1918. The daylight savings provision of that act lasted 7 months before Congress repealed them. So I guess even back then, Congress didn't like daylight savings too much. Interestingly, Woodrow Wilson actually vetoed this repeal of the daylight savings provision, and Congress managed to override that veto, so clearly not very popular. The next time we see daylight savings time come around is going to be, I think, in 1966 with an act called the Uniform Time Act. And what this does is this really standardizes time across the United States and creates what we now know today as daylight savings time. And pretty much we operate under the same basic law. There have been a few changes. I think there was a mistake about Utah's latitude or something in that law that was corrected. For the most part, that law still applies today. We actually did, for a brief period in 1975, repeal the daylight savings provisions of the Uniform Time Act. And that was not, actually, I just said that exactly opposite. We didn't repeal the daylight savings portion. We got rid of standard time and went to full-time daylight savings. Same thing that the Sunshine Protection Act is now proposing. Little problem with that, though. They found when the winter months rolled around that it got light real late in the morning, and kids were oftentimes walking to school in the dark. That's obviously kind of dangerous, and people really didn't like that. So that lasted all of 1 year before we went back to the daylight savings time provision of the Uniform Time Act. And that's operated pretty much since that time. It's kind of amusing to me that with this new Sunshine Protection Act, we would make the same mistake that was made in 1975. I mean, why don't they just go with standard time? That's supposed to be the standard one, right? But no, each time they want to go with one time for the whole year, it's always daylight savings, and I'm not sure why that is. You know, we'll see if they still care about kids going to school in the dark this time around. I suspect a lot of people will, but I guess we'll have to wait and see about that. Another common misconception about daylight savings time, it was not something that was enacted to protect farmers at all. In fact, farmers don't really care because farmers are always going to get up to do their activities when the sun rises. They don't particularly care what time it is. You know, the reason it was enacted was to save energy, and which is fun. You know, ironically is the wrong word, but amusingly, that was also the reason why Benjamin Franklin satirically proposed it in his article. He says that you can save candles by having it get dark an hour later, and you know, proposes putting armed guards outside candle shops and whatnot. Again, give it a read. But that pretty much concludes what I have to say about daylight savings time. Hope you enjoyed that. That's some bonus content for today. You know, have a great weekend. Also, we just posted a new article written by our in-house writer, David Truschel. It is an excellent article addressing the OSHA mandate ruling from the Supreme Court, and it gets into some of the reasons people didn't like that ruling, and really hits the nail on the head in terms of the philosophy behind some of the jurisprudence there. Really give that one a read if you have a chance. That's on our website, lexrex.org. Until next time, you know, have a great weekend. If you like this video, go ahead and hit like and click on the bell icon to subscribe. There, I got it right this time.